Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Merge Medical Podcast. Very excited about the lineup we have today. I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Jeff Cole, Dr. Greg Goldmacher, and Ronak Vyas. Dr. Goldmacher and Ronak are the co-founders of MedCoShare. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Tell us about MedCoShare.
It's turnkey medical spaces. We're based in Philadelphia, and the premise is the ability for private practice physicians and other people in health and wellness to be able to rent rooms part-time or full-time. So it's a flexible basis. It's also month to month, and that's very different than the traditional model, which is, you go and you buy the real estate or you enter into a long-term lease with landlords.
And I assume you're trying to attack a problem and a market opportunity. How can you can dive into that a little bit, even with your new local market?
Yeah. So I guess in the big picture, the market opportunity, the problem is this. We all know medical care is changing and how medicine is practiced is changing. And there's a lot of healthcare providers who are really unhappy. And if you look at, so there was a large Medscape survey done a couple of years ago that showed a lot of unhappiness with physicians with their current career, their current work-life balance, et cetera. And when they asked, what is the thing you'd want the most of? What are you lacking? The biggest answers were autonomy and flexibility. That's what providers want in their career that they're not getting. And one of the biggest reasons why that's the case is it's really hard to launch your own practice. Or if you have your own practice, it's really hard to do things like, lots of people would like to be able to, for example, work part-time, at different parts of your career. You're building a practice, or you're moving towards retirement, or you're taking time for family life and you want to work part-time. Or in the, now, with the growth of telehealth, right? A lot of folks you would like to be able to do like a fusion practice where, you mostly see patients face to face, but, I can't take a biopsy over Zoom, right? Or can't do a minor procedure or examine the patient. Some patients just want to see their doctor in person. So sometimes you need part-time. You'd like to have space, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, and see your patients by telehealth the rest of the time. But that's basically impossible to do with traditional office leasing, right? Because you're signing up for a space, you're signing a long lease, it's expensive, you can't use it part-time. Yeah. And so, that's something that really stands in the way of being able to practice flexibly. And again, or on your own, if you want to remain independent rather than be part of a big group or be an employee, that's really hard to do. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. Doctors are unhappy. I've gone over into clinical research from doing direct medical care, and I get calls constantly from former colleagues, friends I have in medicine saying, "Oh man, I'm not happy. How do I get out of this?" Yeah.
How'd you do that?
How is it different than just like timeshare? Because I was looking at the website, and there's you guys offer quite a few more things than just, an exam table 1 day a week and so forth. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so we launched additional services to help support the practices. So the real estate, only solves one portion of the problem. The other part is staffing and just the administrative burden of running a private practice.
Right.
The more we can support, that infrastructure, the better it is for them and also for us as well. So the big picture is that, we want to become a private practice accelerator. And the only way to do that is to offer all the services that the docs need to be able to run their practice.
So I guess let me add to that by saying that, so the basic kind of, you come in and you can start seeing patients with exam rooms, basic supplies, basic diagnostic equipment, medical waste removal, kind of basic support.
Mm-hmm.
But then, as Ronak says, to really support a practice, there's lots of other needs that a practice has. So what we're already providing is staffing, medical assistants, admins, and practice marketing.
Oh, wow. You're doing the marketing as well.
Yeah, so website development, social media, and of course, as we grow, as the network grows, there's also sort of the built-in marketing of kind of internal referrals.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes.
but so for example, just to give you an example, in our Marlton location, we've got podiatry, we've got cardiology. I'm
Mm-hmm.
really trying to get an endocrinologist in there, right? Because of course they're connected through diabetes patients.
Absolutely.
But and then we, Ronak, I think you have a story recently, don't you, of somebody who came in and basically came in to see one practice,
Yeah.
and became immediately an internal referral to two other practices in the space.
Yeah, what was interesting about that, so our new location is in King of Prussia, and a patient came in because she had an appointment with one of the providers. And then she saw the brochures for all the other providers that are in the space. And in that same day, she ended up seeing 3 different docs.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I mean, really, but that's cool for the patients.
It's cool for the patients, and it's cool for the providers, right? Because you got a community of practice, you got an internal referral network, you got support.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I said, we have this sort of marketing support, and eventually what we'd like to do is EHR support, practice management, billing and scheduling, kind of a more complete practice management package. And as obviously the more we grow as a business, the more that we can sort of scale that and make that more effective.
Mm-hmm.
What is your strategy there? Because I mean, there may be some other companies out there, even startups, it seems like they have that piece that could sit on top of your real estate foundation.
Right. So we could start with partnerships until we bring things in-house. And we've already started that process where, we'll vet different, EHR companies, billing and scheduling, same thing. Eventually, as we grow, the more we can just bring everything under one roof, the better it is for us and for the docs, just because we can kind of control the quality of all the different services. But for us, we wanted to start with the premise that let's solve the one problem first, which is real estate. And then as we grow and as the membership grows, we can start tackling the other problems one by one.
I guess to add to that, the nice thing is that services are both a higher margin business. Now, like thinking this from the business perspective, they're a higher margin business. They're also the moat, right? So that makes it not just, a space that anybody can, rent a space, hang up a sign, but this makes it sort of a unique value proposition that is harder to replicate.
So, Greg, how far are you away? How far away is MedCoShare from making this something that's a turnkey platform where a clinician can walk in, just do the clinical side of things, and walk out on a 1 day a week basis or whatever the arrangement is?
So, I mean, we have a lot of providers who do that now. The challenges here are that those most of them tend to be cash pay type practices rather than insurance billers. I mean, and Ronak, feel free to jump in here. When you say how far away, Jeff, do you mean like in terms of time? Because like I said, we have people who walk in, see their patients and walk out. They're not, they're not doing insurance billing mostly. Although now there are patients. So Ronak, what about the other providers, let's say in Marlton? Some of them are doing insurance billing, right?
Yeah, they are. In terms of bringing everything in-house for us, I think we're one fundraise away from that. And the reason why is we've been growing organically and we haven't raised a lot of money, to date. And so we're very strategic about when we launch things. But, with the next fundraise, we would definitely double down on our services division, possibly even more so than just opening retail locations.
Yeah, I think we can all agree that what's made medicine bad is the paperwork, the bureaucracy, the administrative part of it that we all have to go through now. Even as an anesthesiologist in the OR, in 10 years' time, it's become like we all enjoy taking care of patients. That's why we went to medical school, right? So if some entity such as MedCoShare came up with a system platform that cut out everything but doing the actual patient care, I mean, that's extremely valuable for everybody involved, right?
Yeah, almost a bolt-on menu of services. EMR, RCM, GPO, group purchasing. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that's in the long term, that's the goal. Now, that's interesting, right? That people are innovating in lots of ways to move towards that, right? So there, for example, we've seen the growth of direct primary care and direct specialty care.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's a different practice model. And by the way, we have those folks in our offices, in our locations. So in King of Prussia, there's a practice of direct primary care that was, just launched by a couple of guys who came out of residency, and this is how they wanted to build their practice.
Mm-hmm.
And we're very well suited to that, because you can use only as much space as you actually need for practice building. That's really advantageous. But so
Nice.
that kind of joint innovation, right? Innovation in the model of care, and innovation in kind of the facilities in which the care is provided.
And matching it with the directions medicine is heading, or the
Right.
desires physicians have, I guess you would say.
Right.
How about
Yeah,
your team?
right now there's just a trend for hospitals to buy practices, and typically they're not buying it for the real estate; they're buying it for access to the patients.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, you mentioned private equity earlier, and that's another trend that's really, becoming more and more rapid, where PE groups are purchasing private practices. And one of the reasons why doctors are motivated to sell, even if they may not want to, is one, there's an opportunity to cash out. But I think more important than that is, like, there's a decrease in reimbursements,
Mm-hmm.
along with that administrative burden that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is they just don't want to run the practice, and then they see the fact that they're going to get bought out and get a lump sum, and they're more willing to do that. But MedCoShare is an option for either to not have to worry about that, or if it is a practice that's sold and still wants to be part of the MedCoShare infrastructure, they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Even a post-wreckage solution. So once
Exactly.
private equities come in and really kind of screwed things up, it gives people a way to exit and get on their feet again.
Right. And when private equity takes over, I mean, I think there's been reasonably well documented that they tend to squeeze a practice, and becomes again even harder to operate with any degree of flexibility and autonomy.
They had an article in JAMA just in December. Medical complications increase 25% after private equity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's right there. We all can read it. It's crazy. I see this trend where people are wanting to work more, like you said, that you want to control your schedule. And so I see how this fits. Like, a lot of people just want to work PRN part-time.
Right.
So, and that's a huge trend. I know physicians are finally starting to figure out that they can do what the nurse practitioners and the CRNAs and so forth have done for 10 and 20 years, especially if we don't own these practices. What's the point in working 70 hours per week in something that we don't have equity in? So this fits really good with multiple trends that I see, right?
It does, yeah. And the other option that we haven't really discussed is the ability to open a satellite location.
Mm-hmm.
So, if a doc wants to be part-time in multiple different locations, we have that option. The perfect example I'll give you is there's a cardiologist that we have, and he started in our Philly location. He moved on he added South Jersey, and now he's adding King of Prussia. And so, that option really, if you look at the traditional way of doing it, you would have to go and buy real estate in all three locations, or you'd
Right.
have a combination of leasing, buying, or just straight up leasing, but it would be a lot harder to do.
Yeah, and actually, the way that we've chosen our locations so far, now it's only been so far, is we've chosen them so that they're about a half-hour drive from each other. Right? So you got Marlton, you got Fishtown, and King of Prussia. So a provider, it's feasible for them to kind of hit multiple patient markets,
Mm-hmm.
to be 1 day a week here, 2 days a week here, a day a week there, and maybe a day a week by tele. And there you've got a practice that covers a lot of catchment area geographically, and a lot of flexibility for patients and for the physician.
How about your team? Is it primarily real estate people, or a mixture of yourself, Greg, and and real estate?
Yeah, so the good question. So my background is commercial real estate, and that's where I kind of saw the need because I saw other co-working companies, but they weren't in the medical space. They were just general office, and nobody was doing it for medical. But we have two other co-founders, Amit Mundade and Anthony Khan, and they have a little bit of a real estate background. On top of that, one's an engineer, and the other one's has been in corporate project management for a long time. So I think we have a really strong team. And then obviously with Greg's medical and clinical expertise, him and his wife have been really instrumental in us forming our business idea and execution.
My wife is a nurse practitioner and has a lot more sort of private small practice experience than I do. And we have other folks on the team. So, the way the team formed, Ronak and I went to business school together. Met in our first accounting class. Then eventually ended up doing a capstone project together at Temple's Fox School of Business, where we wrote a business plan for a heart and vascular center together with a team. And then Ronak developed this idea, and we discussed it after we graduated, and the team came together with, as Ronak says, two other folks. But we also have a lot of advisors and other members of the team who are really critical. So, for example, one of our early clients is a cardiologist he's also an investor in the company now. But he's given us a lot of guidance on how to. So my role is essentially to kind of to listen to provide kind of the voice of the customer or understand the needs of healthcare providers and provide feedback about that. But so we've got the folks doing the real estate, doing the operations, project management, and then we've got other others who are the clinicians. So myself, my wife, Dr. George, who's one of the cardiologist I mentioned. One of our other actually recent clients is also an investor, and we tap into our client community to make sure that we really understand what providers need and can deliver it to them.
So a point of clarification: investors, when someone invests in MedCoShare, do they own real estate, or are they buying a piece of the company itself? And if you're buying, obviously you'd get depreciation and you'd get a K1, and all those are great benefits. Tell me about that.
Sure. So it's not a piece of the real estate because we don't own. We haven't purchased anything yet. You're essentially getting equity into the company, and for us, our goal is to grow the company as much as we possibly can, and the return is really going to be from the growth. We're not providing dividends. So I know in commercial real estate, that's a very typical way of doing things where you have a bunch of LPs and then you provide them dividends into a deal. For us, growth is the most important thing. And then hopefully, there's an exit for everyone involved. But that's the strategy from day one.
Can you talk about growth 2023?
So here's been the growth trajectory so far. Let me just summarize it, right? So we opened our first location that was the Fishtown location right as the pandemic was starting, right as the pandemic was starting. Actually, we signed the lease on it, and then we were okay. Well, we're committed. So as hard as it was to get permits and everything, we got the thing built. We launched it, and that first one, the first location, took 14 months from launch to breaking even on a cash flow basis. The second location in Marlton, we opened in, I want to say February 2022. Is that right, Ronak? Or is it?
Yep, that's right.
And that took 8 months to go from opening to break even cash flow. The third location we opened last year in King of Prussia, and I am trying to remember where we are at the moment, whether it's I think it's actually break even cash flow now, right?
It's getting close to that. We've had pretty good momentum in the last couple of months. So we're at 3 locations, and then we launched the services part of it. So mostly marketing and staffing. And then in 2024, we're looking to open 2 to 3 more locations, as well as do a seed round.
Well, so right, it's the additional locations plus if we are able to raise the funds to have full-time dedicated staff focused on developing the services part of it. So it kind of growth both in location numbers, so hopefully doubling the location numbers, and doing the services. I think part of what could enable us to grow even faster is, as we look ahead, moving from a model where it's primarily a lease that we take out as a
Mhm.
company
Mhm.
to a partnership model with landlords. So, I learned about this from listening to a podcast. Actually, I heard Jamie Hidari from Industrious on a podcast talking about how, if you take out a lease as a co-working company, you're taking essentially a lot of the risk because you're on the hook for the lease, no matter what your demand is.
Mhm.
And I didn't know this. Did you know that Marriott doesn't really own, for example, Marriott properties?
Hmm.
And hotels, essentially, yeah. So Marriott doesn't own Marriott hotels. Those are landlords that pay Marriott to manage that as a hotel, and then there's a revenue split.
Mhm.
So that model for co-working is actually probably significantly better from a risk perspective, but also from a growth perspective, because typically then the cost of opening a location drops significantly. So as we shift towards that kind of model, we'll be able to sort of open more locations with the same amount of funds.
So it seems like let me ask this about the commercial market. Ronak, maybe you take this one with your background.
Sure.
So, I see all on the news, Wall Street Journal, et cetera. This work from home phenomenon is not going away, at least a lot of it. And I see all of these office buildings just getting slashed in their valuations, and like some of them in half or even more. And so there's some discussion of repurposing these buildings into other things. But, it seems like to me when everyone else is saying sell, 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 and the sky's falling, why not, or what would be the downside to buying commercial space and then take advantage of what that offers to investors as well? Seems like now's the time to buy. Am I wrong?
Well, you're not wrong, but I would say that any real estate, it's very localized. So there are some markets where the office market got hit really hard,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's other parts where it's not. It's actually not that bad. As a commercial real estate investor, I've always preferred buying and owning.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens is you just tie up more capital to that versus being able to use that to spend on your business. But if we do see a good deal in an office building, I think we are willing to pull the trigger, just because it's something that we know long term. If you can buy something pennies on the dollar and hold it for really 10, 20 years, there could be a great return on that for everyone involved. But that's only if that right situation, right
Mm-hmm.
option comes to us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not really seeking that out just because it would take more time and capital to make that happen.
I see.
Yeah, I think from if I had, in terms of growing value, because there are some positive network effects as we grow, you can spread the cost of, for example, practice management services over more providers, or you can generate more internal referrals with a larger and more diverse network, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think network growth is probably a bigger value add than owning property. So that's sort of my at least intuitive. I haven't modeled this, but I think from a value add perspective, that makes more sense.
Greg, from a referral standpoint, what if you have two clients in the same building and they're both invested in MedCoShare? Would there be issues with those referrals if they're insurance? Let's say they're Medicare patients. Any idea?
Oh, you mean with respect to
Stark and
to Stark laws?
Yeah.
Well, so as far as this is why we're they're not formally referred. This is a community, right? So
Yeah.
patients come in, and the providers within the community can find each other, so they can refer to anybody they want, right? So I don't think we're in violation of Stark laws there.
No, we're not. We looked into this too, and because they're informal referrals, it's perfectly fine.
What about other services that aren't to the level of EMR and group purchasing, just like digital X-ray or lab? Are those, how is that handled? Is that on the provider, or do you guys get involved there?
We haven't gotten involved in that yet. So again, as a startup, we're really focused on what do our clients want? What are they asking for? So at this point, we don't have X-ray or labs on site, but a provider has X-ray on site, but there isn't a shared access to those resources.
Yeah.
But as we grow, that means a bigger revenue stream to draw for capital and investment, and also, more use of services like that. And what our clients say they want first, that's what we'll do first, because we're really focused on basically making our providers happy.
What's your total revenue run rate so far? Can you say?
We're approaching $1 million in gross revenue, and we're getting close to break even. So we really wouldn't have a burn rate.
No.
We didn't have a burn rate last year, but then we opened another location. So there's this kind of ebb and flow of revenue and expenses. But the great thing about us is we're very just like fiscally minded, to the point where, we want to grow organically, unless there's a big fundraise, and then we can start opening more locations and double down on services a little bit faster. But we're doing things step by step.
And that's $1 million in what time frame?
So we started in 2020. So about 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And that, of course, that's pandemic time too.
Exactly. 1 year was
1 year was out.
Yeah.
Right.
For the whole globe.
Yeah.
How do you compare and contrast the experience of WeWork and then what you guys are doing? I can see that this is a far more tailored solution. And even though you're talking about doctors wanting to work part-time, or I think there's still more of an anchor to that business than you may have with what was happening with WeWork, where people might just pick up in a day and leave.
Exactly. So the problem with WeWork is, you don't necessarily need the space, right? You can always work from home or work from another office. With medical, especially if you're, seeing patients and doing procedures, you need to have that infrastructure. You can't just do it over, telehealth. So that's important for us to, that's an important differentiator from WeWork. But the other thing too is WeWork took out too large of spaces and too many locations. So they almost like cannibalized their sales because of that. Like just in downtown Philly, there were 3 locations within walking distance of each other. And that's not what we're trying to do. We understand the real estate portion of it, but the more important piece is, how does this really help a practice? And then ultimately, how does it help the patients? So you want to be in different markets where it's hub and spoke. The patients can come from different neighborhoods. The doctors can get access to different demographics. So when we do like site surveys, that's really important for us to really understand what's that population like in that area, and how can we best serve the patients, because ultimately that's the customers for the docs, right? So, at the end, we're going to be a B2B to C company, and the only way to do that is to be in strategic locations.
So just to add on to that, Ronak, in terms of WeWork, so another thing that WeWork did, in addition to taking out big leases and sort of taking on too much, is that they sank capital into companies and into investments that didn't really have any relationship to their core business. You heard about things like them investing in, gyms or like athletic companies, for example. We are investing specifically in services that are related to the core business, to the core needs of the providers. We got to stay focused there. Again, like I said, both because those are higher margin, they're value add, they're a moat, all of that. But we're not gonna we're really focused in that way.
And Ronak, you mentioned a site survey to help you pick the sites. Tell me more about that and how you would pick a location outside of what you guys know, like Philly.
Sure. So not all of the practitioners are work with insurance companies, right? So some are cash pay, some practices are elective. So we have NPs that do Botox and IV hydration. So because of that, you want to be in an area with a high disposable income. And so that's one is, does the patient population there have that need, and is it, and can they afford it? The other thing is, what's the competition makeup? So how many other doctors are in the area? How many other hospitals? How many other urgent cares? So you want to be in an area that's growing, but that has a shortage of certain providers. And so then that way you can kind of do an over-under studies to see, okay, what is, overly populated or what's underly populated. And so that's another thing that we look at. Number 3 is how many patients have private insurance versus Medicare and Medicaid. So, you want to have a good amount of people that has private insurance. So that also helps the docs with their business. You don't want to be in a declining sort of neighborhood that, just makes it harder for the docs, especially with reimbursements going down. And so we want to make sure that it's going to be viable for the long term for them as well.
Seems like there are several startups that are direct physician access, cash pay, that are launching. It seems like if you had a network of those companies that you supported, it seems like that might drive your growth strategy.
Yeah, and we have a few of those already, so it's definitely helping.
Yeah, we've got a couple of those in town. I want to ask a real specific point here. You've got so you've got 5 different practitioners coming in a week in one office. You provide medical waste disposal, medical record storage. You're discussing making it more turnkey with like EMR, et cetera. What if any, liability does MedCoShare have in supporting the practitioners? Or has this been looked at from an attorney that said, hey, the clinicians are doing their own thing and they have all of the liability? Or do you have some sort of protection with insurance policy for MedCoShare for that purpose?
So because we haven't got into the practice management, all the physicians are essentially doing their own thing. So we don't have access to their patients. Everything is done electronically, so through the cloud, where we don't have access to that. We try to keep the 2 businesses separate. So while we maintain the space and the operations of it, we don't get involved with anything that has to do with their practice just yet. Obviously, marketing is separate. Staffing, we sign agreements between us and the docs if they want to do that. And then they also have to provide their own insurance. So liability and all the insurance that you need to run a practice, we verify that, and we make sure that we're additionally insured as well to just have that to de-risk that situation.
So, and it's not something that I've ever had to think about, but the MAs, do they carry their own malpractice, or is that provided through MedCoShare?
That's through us.
I see.
Any particular towns that you're looking at that you can divulge, or is that company secret at this point?
No, I think there's a lot of great markets. You guys are in Memphis. I heard Nashville is doing phenomenally well. Probably Memphis as well. But we've been looking at Florida, Texas, and then up and down the Northeast corridor. So, Greg's in Boston, and I'd love to have just a chain of locations from Philadelphia all the way to Boston. And then the DC market is another great market. So DC, Maryland, Virginia, West Coast, there's a few other operators on the West Coast. but there's nobody in Washington, there's nobody in Oregon, there's nobody in Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like how many players there are in the space, I would say there's about less than 15. So there's a lot of room for growth.
So when you say that, that's 15 competitors to MedCoShare?
I wouldn't call them direct competitors just yet, but there are 15 other, I think there's less than 15 other companies that doing what we're doing on the real estate side,
Mm-hmm.
but we're also focusing on the services, which really makes us stand out because very few of them are doing that.
Right.
I think from a kind of a landscape point of view, what's interesting is that this feels like the beginning of the inflection curve upward, right? So for years there was like a one company in Arizona and there was one company in New York, and doing medical co-working, and now there's a couple in New York, and they're some have popped up in Texas, California, DC, some other places, but what's happening is, and we think of this as somewhat analogous to the urgent care sort of situation, right? Urgent cares, for a long time, there were a few of them around, and then the industry took off. Yep. And of course now, you see them everywhere. We think that there's a potential for a similar sort of phenomenon here, where it was just a few, and now a bunch have sprung up of, not a bunch, but like Ronak said, maybe sort of a dozen or so. As people recognize that, I tell you, the biggest challenge at the beginning, especially, it's getting a little bit easier, is that people just don't even know that this is an option.
Right.
So providers don't know that this is a way you can practice. And so it was really hard, that's probably still, frankly, our biggest sort of selling challenge and marketing challenge.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Greg. My wife's a nurse, and she's talked about becoming an aesthetician. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that's a barrier to entry to that is all of the scale up to get there. Like, she could go to the courses, 6-week courses, learn how to do the Botox, all of these things, but where's she going to practice?
And then what? Where's she?
And
exactly right. Exactly right.
So this is a really good solution for someone that wants to not have the upfront costs.
Right.
Now, talking about places.
That was actually one of our first. Sorry, Jeff, to interrupt, but that was actually one of our first clients in our Fishtown office. Was a nurse practitioner who does these, medical aesthetic procedures. And this was like, and was able to start and grow and scale, with her patient volume.
So that leads me to the next question. You guys are looking at a new a raise. Tell me about the terms of the raise, if you can, what that's going to look like, what you'll use the funds for, and what an investor can get for their money.
Sure. So it's a $2 million seed round. Half of that is going to go to opening more locations. And then a large portion of that will also be going to the services piece. In terms of why this is, I think, very attractive to investors, especially investors in healthcare, is they already see where trends are going. So if we're able to scale this nationwide, which no other company has so far, and we're the first to market to be able to do that, there's significant upside for us to not only capture the brand name for docs, but then also maybe mergers or acquisition or a bunch of different exit opportunities. So I think this is a great time to be able to do that. Greg, anything you want to add to that?
I mean, as far as the raise goes, we're splitting it this way for the, opening locations and service development. I guess the other part that we haven't mentioned is staffing. As we grow, the founding team, it becomes, it's not enough to have just the founding team and a few early employees. We're going to have to staff up. So that's what the raise is going towards.
Right. And can one of you more specifically describe, you're raising $2 million, but that's at what valuation? And is this a convertible note, or investors getting equity? And give me some more detail on that.
Sure. So it's a $15 million pre-money valuation, and we've raised via SAFE for everything so far. So we could do that, or somebody wants to come in with a significant amount. we can talk different options as well. But the way we've marketed thus far is through safes.
Excellent. Well, you guys, I'm really happy you joined us today. It sounds like you've got a perfectly scalable, hopefully soon to be turnkey solution for allied health professionals needing part-time or full-time clinical office space without the upfront cost of staffing or long-term leases. Did I describe that accurately?
You did. It's perfect.
That's right.
Well, with that, I want to thank you guys for joining us, Dr. Greg Goldmacher and Ronak Vyas from MedCoShare. That's the Merge Medical Podcast. So we're out.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
Thank you.